Right. So now the next thing is we have to start off with object-oriented programming. Fine. OOPS, which is the backbone of Selenium, because without learning OOPS, you cannot just directly jump over to object-oriented program. Without learning OOPS, you just cannot directly jump over to Selenium. Fine. And for that, I'll make a new Java project. Okay. And I'll call it day2. Fine. And in day2, I'll just make a new class and I'll call that class as, say, a simple class like animal. Fine. And I have made a blank class without the main function. Fine. And I'll define few properties of an animal. For example, I can define string name. Okay. Right. The name of the animal. Okay. And I can define, say, int weight of the animal. Right. So these are the two properties which define one animal, one of the two properties. All right. Okay. Now I'll create a new class known as test animal with the main function. Okay. Right. Now what I'm going to do is that in this class I'm going to create something known as the object of animal class. Okay, now what do you mean by creating object of a class? Alright, well, if I simply write over here new animal, then this means I have created the object of this class. If I open simple Microsoft Paint, MS Paint, right, and I simply explain you with this diagram, then when I write this, what I practically mean is that in the memory an object of animal class will be created with the two properties name and weight. Okay, an object or a memory space is allocated. In that memory space, name and weight are present. So I can create as many objects of animal class as I want, and what will happen is that in the memory the objects will keep on getting created. Okay, you can create the objects and every object will have name and weight. Okay, fine. Now if you look at this, then you cannot just access these objects. To access these objects, you need to use object references. Okay, these objects are just standing in the memory. You cannot access them and you have to use object references to access them. Okay, So to generate an object reference, we write like this: animal, say A1 equals to new animal. So A1 becomes the object reference pointing towards the animal class object. Okay, so A1 will point towards this particular object, and it can change the state of the object. Okay, object is different, object reference is different. Alright, I can define animal A2 equals to this. Right, A2 will now point towards the second object. Alright, fine. So object reference is different. I can write animal A3 equals to null. That means A3 is not pointing towards any object, and on the next line I can make it point towards the object of the animal class. Okay, right, fine. And with the help of these object references, you can access the object. I can write A1 dot, hold on, my Eclipse has hanged a little bit. Yeah, I can write A1 dot, I will get the properties name, weight and all. Hold on just a minute. So I can write A1 dot name is, say, cat. A1 dot weight is 50. So you will get, when you write dot, you will get the properties name and weight from the animal class. What are the other functions over here? Just ignore them, but you will get these properties. Okay, so in the memory, this object will become cat with the weight 50. Alright, fine. And similarly, you can write A2 dot name is dog and A2 dot weight is 100. Okay, so this becomes dog with the weight 100. Fine. And A3 dot name, you can define anything. Right. So every object will have its own set of properties which it can initialize to its own set of values. Right. However, the animal class, if you look at it, it's just got two variables, name and weight. But out here, by creating the object of the animal class, you can define every property, right, differently for every object. Okay, if you want to retrieve it, you can retrieve it. You can print system.out.println a1 dot name. Right, you can print the names of all three. When you run it, you see that it prints all the three names. Okay, and you can put a demarcating line. You can print system.out.println. You can print a demarcating line over here. Now I want to explain you that object is different than object reference. this object is different and object references are different, right? And the next thing is, in this animal class, okay, two things. One is static, non-static, and other is object and object references. That's what we are going to focus on. Two concepts, right? Okay, let us look at um, the concept of static and non-static first. All right, and then we will look at the concept of objects and object references. Right. Now, technically, these variables are known as non-static global variable. Okay, right. I can also make a function known as public void print weight. This is a non-static function. Okay, it can print system.out.println animal weight is and the weight. You can print the name of the animal in the beginning. This is the concatenation operator. It can concatenate a variable and a string, right? Okay, so you can use print weight function, and print weight function will also have an individual copy inside every object. Okay, all right. So non-static stuff is present inside every object. There is a copy. If I write over here a1 dot print weight and a2 dot print weight, so I'll get print weight function for every object reference. But when a1 is calling print weight, it will print the weight, name and weight of a1. Okay, then correspondingly for a2 and a3, if I run this, you see that it correspondingly uses the same function is there, but it depends which object reference is calling it. Okay, fine. Now I can also define a property, like say I can add a property int eyes, right, for an animal. So this is also non-static variable. Okay, and I will have to initialize the eyes for every animal to 3, sorry 2. Now this is little weird that the value of this parameter eyes is same for every object, but still we are allocating it memory for every object. Okay, eyes can be, eyes variable will be non-static and the value is 2 for every object. This is something which we can work on, because obviously we would not want this to happen. Okay, some of the properties are common for every object. So what we do is that we make this static. Static basically means it will no longer be the part of the object. It will be removed from the object and it will reside at a memory location, right, which is common for all the objects. Okay, this was A3, right? Yeah. So i's variable will reside at a common location for all the objects. All the objects can access this common location. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to my test animal class and you will see that a1.i's, a2.i's and a3.i's, all three of them have got a yellow line under it. Yellow line doesn't mean an error, it means a warning. It means that you are doing something wrong, technically wrong, okay, right, and it might lead you to a different output as desired. It's not in the lines of certain rules set up by Java. Okay, so it's a warning sign. And the warning is that basically it means that static field animal eyes, if you move your mouse over it, it will tell you the static field animal eyes should be accessed in static way. It basically tells that static has its own way to access. It's not a part of an object. Don't use object reference to access it. Static stuff can be accessed directly with the name of the class. You can write animal dot eyes are equal to 2. You can use the class name to access static variables and functions. Okay, right. I hope you have got my point. Fine. We can make a function in an animal class as well. I can write a function public static void xyz. Fine. And this function can also be directly called with the animal class. Okay, static can be accessed with the class name, but to access non-static stuff, you have to create the object of the class. That is mandatory. Anyone with any questions, you can move your mouse on the top, use the chat option to ask questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Alright, fine. So this is about animal class, test animal, static, non-static. Right. Now let me talk about objects and object references a little bit. Fine. Now object is different in the memory. Okay. And object references, they are different. Alright, object is different than a object reference. What I mean to say is that out here, if I write a1 equals to a2, Now A1 will stop pointing towards the original location. It will point towards the location where A2 is pointing. So A1 will be removed from here and A1 will start pointing towards the location where A2 is pointing to. Fine. So A1 and A2 point towards the same object. If I write the command system.out.println A1.name, A2.name and A3.name again, and if I run it, for A1 and A2 it will print dog, because A1 is not pointing towards the original object now. So you can move object references, and any object reference can change the state. If I write over here A2.name is say giraffe, then this name in the memory will be changed to giraffe. Okay, right. And if I print the same thing, then A1 and A2 will obviously print the updated values. So objects, they are just standing there in the memory. You see that? The object references, they can point towards one object now and towards another object later on. But the object has to be of the same class, of course. Okay, right. So this is basically about object-oriented programming. Four things rather. You can create an object of a class like this, and object reference is different. This is the first thing. The second thing is that in a class there can be non-static global variables and there can be static global variables, and there can be non-static functions and there can be static functions. Non-static functions are accessed, non-static stuff is accessed with the help of the object of a class. Static stuff is accessed directly with the class name. Okay, and the last thing is object is different than object reference. You can make object reference point towards one object now and a different object later on. Fine. Okay, now moving ahead, if you talk about Selenium, then it's very simple. Selenium is something in which everything is inbuilt. Okay, like I opened this window yesterday. Yeah, my microphone has an issue. Are you able to hear me now? There is an issue in recording.